"I'd like to make a toast," Josh announced, raising his glass as everyone at his housewarming party turned to look at him. His eyes gleamed with excitement, an expression I'd seen countless times when he was about to steal the spotlight. "To new beginnings, new homes, and—" He paused dramatically. "To Grandpa's memory." A respectful silence fell over the room. Our grandfather had passed away just 4 days ago, and the wound was still fresh for all of us. I raised my glass along with everyone else, quietly honoring the man who had meant so much to me. "Speaking of Grandpa," Josh continued, setting his drink down on the coffee table, "I have an announcement to make." I watched as he reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope, slightly worn at the edges. My heart skipped a beat. There was something about the way he glanced at me that made me uneasy. "Before he died, Grandpa gave me this letter," Josh said, his voice carrying across the living room of his new Denver home. "He wanted me to have his vacation home by the lake, the place we all loved as kids." The room erupted in surprised murmurs and congratulations. My parents beamed with pride, while Josh's girlfriend Teresa clapped excitedly. My cousin Jenna shot me a confused look from across the room. She knew how close Grandpa and I had been. I sat stunned, unable to process what I was hearing. The lakeside cabin was Grandpa's most cherished possession. It was also the place where I had spent nearly every weekend for the past 3 years, helping him maintain the property, listening to his stories, and simply enjoying his company. Josh, on the other hand, had visited maybe twice in the last 5 years, always complaining about the lack of Wi-Fi and nothing to do. But more importantly, Grandpa had given me a small wooden box 3 weeks ago, making me promise not to open it until the time was right. Inside was a notarized deed transferring ownership of the vacation home to me. He had already given me the property. It wasn't even part of his estate. As Josh unfolded the letter and began to read what were supposedly Grandpa's wishes, I studied his face. Was he lying? Did he know about the deed? Had Grandpa somehow changed his mind without telling me? "That's great. Good for you, Josh," I managed to say with a forced smile, though my mind was racing. I needed to get home and check the documents in that wooden box right away. I quietly excused myself, saying I needed to use the bathroom, and slipped away from the celebration. As I closed the bathroom door behind me, I leaned against it and took a deep breath. The letter Josh had shown everyone didn't make sense. Grandpa's handwriting had become increasingly shaky in his final months due to arthritis, but the signature I glimpsed looked suspiciously smooth and confident. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. "You okay?" That was weird. Josh never even cared about the cabin. I texted Jenna back, "Need to check something at home. Can you cover for me? Say I got called into work?" Within minutes, she had made my excuses to the family, and I slipped out the back door while everyone was still fawning over Josh's inheritance. The drive to my apartment felt surreal. Streetlights blurred as memories of Grandpa flooded my mind, teaching me to fish off the dock, pointing out constellations in the clear mountain sky, laughing at my terrible attempts to skip stones across the lake. The vacation home wasn't just property. It was where our most precious memories lived. It was our special place, where Grandpa had taught me about resilience, patience, and finding joy in simple things. Josh had never shown any interest in those lessons or the cabin itself. His announcement felt like a violation of something sacred. As soon as I got home, I went straight to my closet and retrieved the wooden box Grandpa had given me. It was his old cigar box, worn smooth with age, the cedar still fragrant when opened. "Don't open this until you need to know the truth," he'd told me, his eyes crinkling with that familiar wisdom that suggested he knew more than he was saying. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside lay several neatly folded documents, a sealed envelope with my name written on it, and a small brass key I recognized immediately. It opened the antique roll-top desk in Grandpa's study at the cabin. I unfolded the top document and gasped. It was exactly as I remembered, a notarized deed transferring ownership of the vacation home to me, dated 6 months ago. Alongside it was a letter in Grandpa's unmistakably shaky handwriting. "My dearest Jules," it began, By the time you read this, I'll likely be gone. I've decided to give you the cabin while I'm still alive to avoid any complications. You're the only one who truly loved this place as much as I did. Your brother never showed interest except when he needed a place to host parties when I wasn't around. Tears blurred my vision as I continued reading. I know your brother might contest this, which is why I've had everything properly notarized and filed. There's a copy with my lawyer, Harold Thompson. The cabin is legally yours already. This isn't part of my will or estate. I trust you to honor the spirit of our special place. I sat back, stunned. Josh had lied. He'd fabricated a letter, knowing full well Grandpa had already given the property to me. The audacity was breathtaking, even for him. My phone buzzed with messages from my parents, asking where I'd gone. Josh had texted too. Nice disappearing act. Don't worry, you can still visit the cabin if you ask nicely. That's when I knew what I had to do. I wouldn't confront him via text or phone. No, this called for something more direct. I gathered the documents, tucked them back into the box, and checked the time. The party would still be going for a couple more hours. I wiped my tears, took a deep breath, and headed back to my car. It was time for the truth to come out. The drive back to Josh's house gave me time to think. I wasn't going to cause a scene. That wasn't my style, and certainly not what Grandpa would have wanted. He'd always told me, "When you have truth on your side, Jules, you don't need to shout it from the rooftops. The quiet truth hits harder than any loud lie." I parked a block away from Josh's house, the wooden box secure on the passenger seat beside me. For a moment, I just sat there, gathering my courage. I thought about all the weekends I'd spent with Grandpa at the cabin while Josh was too busy to visit. I remembered how Grandpa's face would light up when I arrived, how we'd spend hours talking about everything and nothing on the porch swing. "What would you do, Grandpa?" I whispered, running my fingers over the box's smooth surface. The answer came almost immediately in my mind. The right thing, with grace. I decided not to go back into the party right away. Instead, I texted Jenna. "How many people are still there?" She replied quickly, "Just family now. Most guests left after dinner." "You coming back?" This was perfect. I didn't want a crowd for what I needed to do. I took the box and walked the short distance to Josh's front door. When I knocked, it was Josh himself who answered, his expression shifting from surprise to wariness. "Work emergency over already?" he asked, his tone suggesting he didn't believe there had been one in the first place. "We need to talk, Josh," I said calmly, stepping past him into the house. Everyone looked up as I entered the living room. My father was examining what must have been Josh's letter more closely, while my mother was already discussing renovation plans for the cabin with Teresa. Jenna sat quietly in the corner, watching the scene with obvious discomfort. "Jules is back," my mother announced unnecessarily. "We were just discussing Josh's wonderful news about the cabin." "Actually," I said, setting the wooden box down on the coffee table, "that's what I wanted to talk about." Josh's eyes locked onto the box, recognition flickering across his face. "What's that?" he asked, though I could tell from his expression that he had a good idea. "Something Grandpa gave me 3 weeks ago," I explained, keeping my voice level. "He asked me not to open it until the time was right." I looked directly at Josh. "I think that time is now." Before Josh could protest, my father leaned forward with interest. "What is it, Jules?" I opened the box and carefully removed the notarized deed and Grandpa's letter. 6 months ago, Grandpa legally transferred ownership of the vacation home to me, I said, laying the documents on the table for everyone to see. "It's already mine. It's not part of his estate or will." The room fell silent. My mother's mouth dropped open, while my father picked up the deed with a furrowed brow. Josh stood frozen, his face draining of color. "This is notarized," my father confirmed, examining the document. "And this is definitely your grandfather's signature." "That's impossible," Josh finally sputtered. "Grandpa gave me the letter. He wanted me to have the cabin." "May I see that letter again?" I asked, extending my hand toward my father. He handed it over, and I placed it side by side with Grandpa's handwritten letter from my box. The difference was stark and obvious. The handwriting on Josh's letter was an attempt at imitation, but it lacked the telltale shakiness caused by Grandpa's arthritis. The signature was too perfect, too controlled. "Josh," my mother said slowly, her voice barely above a whisper, "did you forge this letter?" His silence was answer enough. Josh's silence stretched uncomfortably before he finally broke it, his voice a mixture of defiance and desperation. "You don't understand. It's not fair that she gets everything." "Everything?" I echoed, genuinely confused. "What are you talking about?" "You were always Grandpa's favorite," Josh said, his words rushing out like water through a broken dam. "Always visiting him, always helping him, always the perfect grandchild. The rest of us barely got a look in." My father cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation had taken. "Josh, regardless of how you feel, forging your grandfather's signature is serious." "Let me see those," my mother interjected, reaching for both letters. She compared them side by side, her expression shifting from disbelief to disappointment. "Oh, Josh," she sighed, "how could you do this?" Teresa slowly stood up, her face pale. "I think I should go," she murmured, avoiding Josh's pleading look as she gathered her purse and headed for the door. "Wait, Teresa, this isn't what it looks like," Josh called after her, but she was already gone, the front door closing firmly behind her. The room fell silent again. Jenna caught my eye and gave me a small, supportive nod. She had always seen through Josh's antics, even when our parents couldn't. "I don't understand," my father said finally, turning to Josh. "Why would you announce something like this without even checking if it was true? The will reading isn't until next week." Josh's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "I found out about the deed," he admitted. "I was at Grandpa's lawyer's office last week, asking about the estate, and Thompson mentioned that the cabin wasn't part of it because it had already been taken care of. He wouldn't tell me more because of client confidentiality, but I knew what it meant. I thought if I announced it first, maybe..." "Maybe what?" my mother pressed. "Maybe Jules would just let you have it?" "Maybe everyone would believe me instead of her for once," Josh snapped, his voice rising. "Maybe I could have something that mattered to Grandpa, too." His words hung in the air, revealing a jealousy deeper than I had realized. I felt a twinge of sympathy, despite everything. Had he really felt that excluded from Grandpa's life? "Josh," I said quietly, "Grandpa invited you to the cabin countless times. You always said you were too busy." "Because I felt like an intruder," he shot back. "By the time I realized what I was missing, it was too late. You two had your special bond, your inside jokes, your traditions. There was no room for me." My father shook his head, disappointment evident in his expression. "That doesn't justify lying to the entire family, son." Josh slumped into a chair, the fight seemingly draining out of him. "So what happens now?" he asked, not looking at any of us. "You've made your point, Jules. You win." "This isn't about winning," I said, thinking of Grandpa and what he would want in this moment. Despite Josh's deception, he was still my brother, and Grandpa had loved him too, in his own way. I reached back into the wooden box and pulled out something I hadn't mentioned yet, a sealed envelope with Josh's name on it, written in Grandpa's distinctive handwriting. "He left something for you too," I said, holding it out to my brother. Josh looked up, suspicion and hope warring in his expression. "What is it?" "I don't know," I admitted honestly. "Grandpa told me not to open anything that wasn't addressed to me." After a moment's hesitation, Josh took the envelope and carefully opened it. As he read the contents, his expression shifted from defensive to shocked, and finally to something that looked like genuine remorse. "He knew," Josh said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "He knew I might try to claim the cabin." My mother moved to sit beside him. What does it say, honey? Josh hesitated, then handed her the letter. Read it, he said. Everyone should hear it. My mother adjusted her reading glasses and began. Dear Josh, if you're reading this, then Jules has opened my cedar box, which means one of two things. Either I'm gone, or something has happened that made her feel it was necessary to reveal its contents. I've known you since the day you were born, and I know your heart. You've always wanted recognition and validation, things I perhaps failed to give you in the way you needed. But I also know when you feel overlooked, you sometimes make impulsive decisions that hurt others and ultimately yourself. The cabin has been transferred to Jules. This was a decision I made with great thought and love. Not because I didn't care for you, but because Jules connected with the place in a way you never did. She understood what made it special to me, and I trust her to preserve that spirit. What you need isn't a property, Josh. It's a purpose. I've enclosed a check for $25,000. Use it to start something meaningful. Find what makes your heart come alive the way the cabin does for Jules. Maybe it's that business idea you mentioned last Christmas, or perhaps something else entirely. I hope someday you'll understand that this isn't about favorites or fairness. It's about recognizing different paths for different hearts. Jules will keep the door open for you at the cabin, I have no doubt, but your future lies in building something of your own. With love and hope, Grandpa. When my mother finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Josh sat with his head bowed, the check clutched in his trembling hand. He saw right through me, he murmured, even from the grave. My father moved to place a comforting hand on Josh's shoulder. Your grandfather was a perceptive man. Josh looked up at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. I'm sorry, Jules, I had no right to try and take what was already yours. The words seemed to cost him, but they also sounded sincere. I nodded, not quite ready to offer forgiveness, but acknowledging his apology. There's something else in the box, I said, reaching for it again. I pulled out a small photo album and opened it to reveal pictures spanning years. Josh and me as children at the cabin, building sandcastles by the lake, roasting marshmallows with Grandpa at the fire pit. He kept this in his desk at the cabin, I explained, turning pages to show more recent photos. He never stopped hoping you'd come around, Josh. My brother stared at the photos, emotion washing over his face. I really messed up, didn't I? Yes, I agreed, not sugarcoating it. But Grandpa obviously thought you could do better. The room fell silent again, but it was a different kind of silence, contemplative rather than tense, sad rather than angry. The evening had taken a turn none of us had expected, laying bare years of complicated feelings and unspoken resentments. Jenna, who had been watching silently, finally spoke up. So, what happens now? It was the question hanging in the air for all of us. What do you do after a moment of painful truth? How do you move forward from betrayal and revelation? I closed the wooden box, feeling the weight of responsibility Grandpa had placed on me, not just for the cabin, but perhaps for healing our family too. Now, I said quietly, we tried to honor what Grandpa wanted for both of us. The gathering broke up soon after. My parents left with concerned glances back at Josh, clearly torn between disappointment in his actions and worry for his well-being. Jenna gave me a quick hug before heading out, whispering, "Call me tomorrow." And then it was just Josh and me in his new house, the celebratory atmosphere completely evaporated. Josh moved around his kitchen mechanically, making coffee neither of us really wanted. The silence between us felt heavy with all the years of competition and misunderstanding. I didn't plan it, he said finally, setting a mug in front of me. The forgery, I mean. When I found out about the deed, I was angry, hurt. I made the letter that same night, not really thinking I'd use it. Then why did you? I asked, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. Josh stared into his coffee as if it might hold answers. When everyone was here tonight celebrating my new house, I wanted more, something bigger to announce. It just came out. He looked up, his expression vulnerable in a way I rarely saw. I've always been jealous of what you had with Grandpa. You could have had it too, I pointed out, not unkindly. He wanted that. I know that now, Josh admitted. But I was too proud, too stubborn to see it then. He hesitated, then asked, "What are you going to do with the cabin?" It was the question I'd been asking myself since Grandpa had given me the deed 6 months ago. Keep it as it is, mostly. It needs some repairs, but I don't want to change its character. Josh nodded, looking relieved. That's good. It should stay the way Grandpa loved it. I studied my brother, this person I'd grown up with but sometimes felt I barely knew. You're welcome there, you know, anytime. His eyes widened slightly in surprise. Even after what I did? The cabin was meant to bring family together, not drive us apart, I said, echoing what I believed Grandpa would have wanted. That doesn't mean I'm not still angry, or that I trust you completely right now, but the door is open. Josh seemed to understand the qualified olive branch for what it was. Thank you. We sat in silence for a few more minutes, sipping coffee that had already gone cold. The night had been exhausting, emotionally and physically, and there was still much to process. I should go, I said finally, standing up. It's been a long night. Josh walked me to the door. Before I left, he asked, "Do you think Grandpa knew this would happen? The showdown over the cabin?" I thought about the careful preparation Grandpa had made, the notarized deed, the separate letters, his instructions to me about when to open the box. I think he hoped it wouldn't, I answered honestly. But he was prepared in case it did. Josh shook his head, a rueful smile on his face. He always was 3 steps ahead of everyone else. That he was, I agreed. As I drove home, the wooden box secure on the seat beside me once more, I felt a curious mixture of emotions, sadness for the pain of the evening, relief that the truth was out, and a tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, this could be a turning point for Josh and me. The cabin keys felt heavy in my pocket, not just metal, but the weight of responsibility and memory. Grandpa had trusted me with something precious, and I intended to honor that trust. But maybe there was room for Josh in that picture too, if he was willing to meet me halfway. Tomorrow I decided I would drive up to the cabin, sit on the porch swing, watch the light change over the water, and perhaps feel Grandpa's presence one more time, guiding us toward healing, even in his absence. The cabin looked exactly as I remembered it. Weathered cedar siding, emerald green shutters, and the wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides of the structure. As I pulled into the gravel driveway, the early morning sun cast long shadows through the pines, creating patterns across the ground that seemed to welcome me home. I sat in my car for a moment, taking it all in. This was mine now. Not just a building or a piece of property, but a sanctuary filled with memories and whispers of the past. I could almost see Grandpa in his favorite rocking chair, baseball cap pulled low over his eyes as he dozed in the afternoon light. The cabin key slid into the lock with a familiar resistance. You had to jiggle it just right, a quirk Grandpa had refused to fix because he claimed it kept out the riffraff. Inside, everything was just as he'd left it. Books stacked on the side table, fishing gear organized meticulously in the corner, the faint scent of pipe tobacco lingering in the air despite his doctor's orders to quit smoking years ago. I moved through the rooms slowly, trailing my fingers along furniture that had been in our family for generations. The stillness was peaceful rather than oppressive, as if the cabin itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from Jenna. "How's the cabin?" "Your mom called me this morning. Josh is a wreck." I typed back, "Cabin's perfect. Not sure how to feel about Josh yet." Another message followed quickly. "He's been calling everyone, trying to explain himself. Your parents are still pretty upset." I wasn't surprised. The fallout from last night's revelations would take time to settle. Trust, once broken, couldn't be mended overnight. Setting my phone aside, I walked to the large picture window overlooking the lake. The water sparkled in the morning light, serene and unchanging despite the human drama unfolding around it. "I'm here, Grandpa," I whispered to the empty room. "I'll take good care of it, I promise." 3 weeks passed before Josh reached out. His text was simple. "Can we talk? At the cabin, maybe?" I deliberated for a day before responding with a time and date. Part of me wasn't ready to share this space with him yet, but Grandpa's voice kept echoing in my mind. "Holding grudges makes the heart heavy, Jules. Sometimes forgiveness is more for you than for them." When Josh's car pulled up the following Saturday, I was sitting on the porch swing, nursing a cup of coffee. He approached slowly, looking more subdued than I'd seen him in years. "This place hasn't changed at all," he said, glancing around. "That's the idea," I replied, gesturing to the chair across from me. He sat down, fingers drumming nervously on his knees. "I've been thinking about what to say for weeks, but everything sounds inadequate." "Try anyway," I suggested, neither cold nor particularly warm. Josh took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, not just for the forgery, but for everything. For being jealous of your relationship with Grandpa, for resenting you when I should have been looking at my own choices." I studied his face, trying to gauge the sincerity behind his words. The Josh I knew was a master of telling people what they wanted to hear, when it served his purposes. "Why did you do it?" I asked. "The truth, Josh." He looked out at the lake, quiet for a long moment. "I thought if I had the cabin, it would somehow make up for all the time I didn't spend here. Like I could buy back those moments I missed." His voice cracked slightly. "Stupid, right?" There was a vulnerability in his admission that felt genuine. Not an excuse, just a sad acknowledgement of a faulty thought process. "I used the money," he said suddenly. "Grandpa's check." "For what?" "I enrolled in that woodworking course Grandpa was always telling me to try. The one I was too busy for." He gave a self-deprecating laugh. "Turns out I'm terrible at it, but I'm going to stick with it. He was right. It's calming, being focused on creating something with your hands." It was a small thing, but significant coming from Josh, who had always been too impatient for such pursuits. "He would have liked that," I said quietly. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the gentle lapping of water against the shore and the distant call of birds. It was the same peaceful soundtrack that had accompanied countless conversations between Grandpa and me over the years. "I have something to show you," I said finally, standing up. Josh followed me inside to Grandpa's study, where the antique roll-top desk stood in the corner, bathed in morning light. I used the brass key from the wooden box to unlock it, revealing neatly organized compartments filled with papers, letters, and small mementos. "Grandpa kept everything," I explained, pulling out a folder marked Josh. Inside were newspaper clippings of Josh's high school debate championship, photos of his college graduation, and even a printout of the webpage announcing his promotion last year. "He was proud of you," I said softly. "He just showed it differently than you wanted." Josh's fingers trembled slightly as he paged through the collection. I had no idea he kept track of all this. "There's a folder for each family member," I explained. He called it his brag book. Josh looked up, his eyes glistening. "I really messed up, didn't I?" "Yes," I agreed, not sugarcoating it. "But Grandpa believed in second chances, so do I." I pulled out a calendar from my bag and handed it to him. "I've marked weekends when I'll be up here for maintenance and bigger projects. I could use an extra pair of hands, even terrible woodworking ones." A smile tugged at his lips. "Really?" "The cabin was meant to bring family together, not drive us apart," I said. "That's what Grandpa wanted." Later that afternoon, we sat on the end of the dock, feet dangling in the cool water. Josh pitched ideas for renovating the boathouse while I sketched possibilities in a notebook. "You know," Josh said, looking out across the water, "I think Grandpa knew exactly what he was doing, giving you this place." "What do you mean?" "You didn't just inherit a cabin," he said thoughtfully. "You inherited his role, keeping the family connected to what matters." As the sun began its descent behind the mountains, casting golden reflections across the lake, I realized Grandpa had given me more than property. He'd given me the chance to heal old wounds and forge new connections, starting with the brother I'd almost lost to resentment and pride.